Welcome to Myers ASMR. Today we'll be talking about jazz swing music. But first, I have a taste for this delicious carrot cake that I made. Let's get into it. It looks like cream cheese on top, but it's Neufchatel and Greek yogurt. There's no butter at all, no confectioner's sugar. I used maple syrup in the place of the confectioner's sugar. And it's amazing. Oh my gosh. In the place of butter, I used avocado oil, and it is so moist. And I also cut down on the sugar. You know, maple syrup has a flavor of its own. It's just so good. It's hard to put it down. I just did a single layer. I didn't want anything too big. I think it tastes better the next day. I grate fresh ginger into mine. Whew, tastes amazing. All right, well, let's get into today's story. We're talking about the first disciples, the Austin High Gang. Oliver's records, as well as an even earlier series of Kenneth's by the greatest of the white New Orleans ensembles, the New Orleans Rhythm Kings, or NORC, documented music that was turning the heads of an entire generation of white teenage musicians in Chicago. While these new sounds attracted youngsters from all parts of the city, many of the most talented and committed attended Austin High School. And as a group, they became known as the Austin High Gang. Such important players of the future as trumpeters Jimmy McPartland and Francis Muggsy Spanier, clarinetist Benny Goodman, tenor saxophonist Lawrence Bud Freeman, banjo player / guitarist Eddie Condon, and drummers Gene Krupa and George Wetling would gather in ice cream parlors to play records, stand outside dance halls and speakeasies that they were too young to enter, or, if they were lucky, sneak into the dark corners of these establishments to hear the new sounds. Did you know Armstrong's sound was already so imposing in the early 1920s that he was reportedly positioned in the back of the recording studio so as not to obliterate the other musicians. Jimmy McPartland and other young Chicagoans were among the first white musicians to fall under the spell of jazz. Chicago, the jazz mecca. Soon, other white youngsters were arriving in Chicago with jazz on their mind, including cornetist Leon Bix Beiderbecke from Davenport, Iowa, who had first heard Armstrong during one of Fate Marable's visits. The Friars Inn and the music played there by the Newark made the earliest impressions. But King Oliver and his young second trumpeter quickly became the favorites. Several of the Austin High Gang began to bring their instruments to the Lincoln Gardens and acquire first-hand experience when Oliver invited them to sit in. Did you know the New Orleans Rhythm Kings called themselves the Friars Society Orchestra on their 1922 debut recordings? Armstrong and Henderson. Armstrong's influence would not be confined to Chicago for long. Once he reached New York, his circle expanded to include stints working with such jazz greats as Fletcher Henderson, Don Redman, Coleman Hawkins, Sidney Bechet, and Bessie Smith. Did you know Fletcher Henderson was a college-educated black Southerner who pursued a career in music when he couldn't earn a living using his training in chemistry? A competent pianist, Henderson became one of big band's leading arrangers. Armstrong continued to act as a magnet for aspiring musicians when he left Oliver in 1924 and began working under his own name across the street from Lincoln Gardens at the Sunset Cafe. At the urging of Lil, his confident and ambitious new bride, Armstrong soon accepted an offer to join Fletcher Henderson's orchestra in New York. Henderson had formed his first band in 1921 to accompany single singer Ethel Waters on her national tour of black theaters. While in New Orleans on this tour, Henderson first heard Armstrong and offered him a job. Armstrong turned that chance down because there was no room in Henderson's band for drummer and Armstrong friend Zutty Singleton. This was a rare recruiting failure for Henderson, who already was gaining a reputation for obtaining the services of the best musicians. By the time Armstrong decided to join Henderson's band, two other seminal figures were already aboard: Don Redman and Coleman Hawkins. Alto saxophonist Redman was responsible for the best of the band's early arrangement and for the discreet use of trumpet, trombone, and reed sections that amplified the usual approach of a three-horn New Orleans ensemble. Tenor saxophonist Hawkins was already hailed as a technical wizard specializing in an aggressive slap-tongue technique. Despite the obvious technical strengths of these and other musicians in the band, early Henderson recordings sound stiff and unauthentic, with a rote approach to the dance tunes performed at the band's regular Roseland ballroom job and contrived effects on the occasional stomp or blues title. This changed quickly once Armstrong began recording with Henderson in the autumn of 1924. Coleman Hawkins paid close attention to Armstrong and in the process became acknowledged as the father of the jazz saxophone. Armstrong's impact. What Armstrong brought to Henderson over the next 14 months, clearly audible in such recordings as Go Long Mule, Copenhagen, and Everybody Loves My Baby, was a new way to allow the music to breathe that was instantly infectious. The herky-jerky, uninflected rhythms in Redman's modifications of stock dance band arrangements and the blustery Hawkins approach to the saxophone gave way to flowing, vibrant tempos and melodically shapely and blues-drenched improvised lines the very qualities that made Armstrong's solos and lead lines so memorable. These discoveries were revelations to talented musicians like Redman and especially Hawkins, whose own advanced harmonic ideas and virtuoso execution provided the model for chord-based improvising or playing the changes that would blossom over the decade that Hawkins spent as Henderson's star soloist. The first great big band. Henderson developed Armstrong's rhythmic and melodic ideas in the context of Redman's sectionalized riff-based arranging style. When Redman left in 1927, Henderson became more active as an arranger while also calling upon his brother Horace and the young multi-instrumentalist Benny Carter, particularly adept at scoring saxophone ensembles for important contributions. In Henderson's hands, music with a New Orleans pedigree, including Sugarfoot Stomp and Jelly Roll Morton's King Porter Stomp, became frequently recorded signature tunes. The former was a retitling of King Oliver's Dippermouth Blues, with Oliver's famous three-chorus solo played verbatim. I'm Coming, Virginia, Somebody Loves Me, and other popular songs also acquired a jazz flavor. A parade of striking soloists, including Rex Stewart, cornet, Henry Red Allen, trumpet, Jimmy Harrison, trombone, and William Buster Bailey, clarinet, joined the reliable Hawkins. Must know, Fletcher Henderson created the blueprint for the tightly arranged and star-laden jazz orchestra, and for what would become known as big band swing. He did it using many of Louis Armstrong's techniques. Armstrong and the Blues Singers. During his time in New York with Henderson, Armstrong found more extensive opportunities to expose his trumpet on a series of small group recordings, many of which found him accompanying blues singers. These sessions might be considered the initial evidence that jazz was about to become a soloist medium, with individual musicians who commanded sufficient virtuosity and imagination to build and sustain lengthy improvisations outside the polyphonic context popularized by Oliver and the Nork. These recordings also indicated how inexhaustible the blues form would prove to be in the hands of inspired interpreters. Perhaps the only two performers capable of operating at Armstrong's level in this period shared the spotlight on several of these recordings. Sidney Bechet, now concentrating on a soprano saxophone he had purchased in London, proved equally capable of dominating an ensemble of recordings released under the name of Clarence Williams' Blue Five and the Red Onion Jazz Babies. Bessie Smith, acknowledged as the Empress of the Blues, never sounded more commanding than on the 9 tracks she recorded with Armstrong in support during 1925. I have to take a taste of my cakey cake. I combine whole wheat flour with all-purpose flour. I want to show you a picture of Bessie Smith. Isn't she grand? Well, thanks for listening and watching. Like and subscribe. Catch me in the next video. And may you find lasting happiness. Bye.